The letter from the mayor slid across Miss Daphne Jameson's desk with a soft scraping sound that might as well have been a knife to her heart. Her hands trembled as she picked it up, 20 pairs of young eyes watching her from their desks in the single-room schoolhouse of Aurora, Colorado. The spring of 1876 had just begun to warm the earth outside, but inside, a terrible chill spread through her body. "Miss Jameson," young Thomas Miller asked, his voice small in the suddenly silent room, "are you all right?" Daphne straightened her spine, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "Children, please open your reading primers to page 43. Martha, would you lead the class for a moment?" The 13-year-old girl nodded solemnly, moving to the front as Daphne stepped onto the small porch of the schoolhouse, unfolding the letter with fingers that wouldn't quite cooperate. The town council's decision was final. Her position as schoolteacher was terminated, effective immediately, on grounds of moral impropriety. Her unwed status, combined with rumors about her past in Boston, had finally given Mayor Hollister the excuse he'd been looking for. A sob caught in her throat. 2 years of building this school, of pouring her heart into these children, all destroyed because she dared to live independently as an unmarried woman of 25. The accusations were false, but truth mattered little in a town run by men who viewed her education and independence as threats. "Miss Jameson," Daphne turned, hastily wiping her eyes. Isaac Caldwell stood at the bottom of the steps, his hat in his hands, tall and lean in the morning sunlight. His presence was unexpected. The local rancher rarely came to town on weekdays, especially not to the schoolhouse. "Mr. Caldwell." She nodded stiffly, attempting to regain her composure. "I'm afraid this isn't a good time." Isaac shifted his weight, dust from the trail still clinging to his boots and denim pants. His dark hair was windswept, his face sun-bronzed from long days in the saddle. At 32, he'd established himself as one of the most successful ranchers in the territory, respected but somewhat mysterious to the townsfolk who wondered why such a prosperous man remained unmarried. "I heard what the council decided," he said quietly. "News travels fast." Evidently. Bitterness seeped into her voice as she folded the letter. "I haven't even had time to inform the children. It ain't right, what they're doing." His voice was low, a hint of anger beneath the measured tone. "You're the finest teacher this town's ever had." Daphne shook her head, fighting back tears. "Apparently, my teaching abilities matter less than my marital status." Isaac stepped closer, resting one boot on the bottom step. "Miss Jameson, Daphne, I've been meaning to speak with you for some time now. Perhaps this isn't how I imagined it, but—" He took a deep breath. "Would you allow me to call on you properly?" She blinked in surprise. "Mr. Caldwell, if this is pity, it's not." His voice was firm, his blue eyes steady. "I've admired you since you first came to Aurora. Your kindness, your intelligence, the way you stand up for what's right even when it's difficult. I should have spoken sooner, but I never found the right moment." A crash from inside the schoolhouse broke the moment. "I should return to my students," Daphne said, "for whatever time I have left with them." Isaac nodded, placing his hat back on his head. "May I come inside? I'd like to speak with you further if you're willing." Something in his expression, earnest, determined, yet gentle, made her hesitate before nodding. "Very well." Inside, the children had abandoned all pretense of reading, whispering among themselves as Martha unsuccessfully attempted to maintain order. They fell silent when Daphne entered with Isaac following behind. "Children, this is Mr. Caldwell," she said, gesturing to the rancher. "He's come to speak with me about an important matter." Isaac removed his hat again, nodding politely to the class. "Good morning." The children murmured greetings, their eyes wide with curiosity. Isaac was something of a local legend, the man who'd built a cattle empire from nearly nothing, who'd once stopped a bank robbery single-handed, who kept to himself except when the town needed him. "Miss Jameson," he said, turning to face her directly, "I believe I have a solution to the council's concerns." The entire classroom seemed to hold its breath as Isaac stepped forward. With deliberate movements, he lowered himself to one knee before her desk, his expression solemn yet determined. "Miss Daphne Jameson, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Gasps rippled through the classroom. Daphne's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. "Mr. Caldwell," she whispered, "you cannot be serious. I've never been more serious in my life." His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. "I know this is sudden, but I've admired you from afar for nearly 2 years now. I'm asking not just to solve your current predicament, but because I believe we could build a good life together." Martha let out a small squeal before clapping her hand over her mouth. The younger children giggled, while the older boys exchanged knowing glances. Daphne's mind raced. Isaac Caldwell was respected, honest, and by all accounts a good man. Yet marriage. To a man she'd exchanged perhaps 50 words with over 2 years. It seemed absurd, desperate, a solution born of necessity rather than love. "This is unexpected," she finally managed. "I'm not sure what to say." "Say you'll consider it," he replied. "That's all I ask for now." Before she could respond, the schoolhouse door swung open. Mayor Hollister stood in the doorway, his round face flushed with self-importance, flanked by 2 members of the town council. "Miss Jameson," he said coldly, "I trust you've read our notice. We've come to escort you from the premises. Mrs. Peterson will take over your duties temporarily." Isaac rose slowly to his feet, turning to face the mayor. "That won't be necessary, Mayor Hollister." The mayor's eyes narrowed. "Mr. Caldwell, this is town business. It doesn't concern you." "I believe it does." Isaac's voice remained calm but carried an authority that made the mayor hesitate. "Miss Jameson has just agreed to become my wife. Your concerns about her unmarried status will soon be resolved." Daphne's eyes widened at the lie. She'd agreed to no such thing, but she remained silent, watching the exchange with growing interest. Mayor Hollister sputtered. "This is highly irregular. The council has already made its decision, and I'm sure the council can reconsider, given these new circumstances." Isaac's tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "Unless you'd prefer I withdraw my annual contribution to the town's development fund." The mayor paled. Isaac's contributions had built the new bridge over Cottonwood Creek and funded half the town hall. "Well, that is to say, perhaps we were hasty. I thought you might see it that way." Isaac turned back to Daphne, his expression softening. "Miss Jameson, with your permission, I'll call on you this evening to discuss our arrangement further." Daphne felt trapped between 2 impossible choices: lose her position or agree to a marriage with a virtual stranger. Yet something in Isaac's eyes suggested there might be more to his offer than mere convenience. "That would be acceptable, Mr. Caldwell," she finally said, her voice steadier than she felt. The mayor cleared his throat. "Well, given these developments, the council will reconvene to discuss the matter. Miss Jameson, you may continue your duties for now." With as much dignity as he could muster, he retreated, the council members following in his wake. When the door closed behind them, the classroom erupted in excited chatter. Daphne clapped her hands, calling for order. "Children, that's quite enough. Return to your reading immediately." As they reluctantly obeyed, she turned to Isaac, keeping her voice low. "Mr. Caldwell, what have you done?" "Bought you some time at the very least," he replied quietly. "The rest is up to you. I meant what I said, Daphne, but I won't hold you to anything you don't want." She studied his face, searching for ulterior motives and finding none. Why would you do this? You hardly know me. I know enough. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I'll call it 7 if that suits you. Daphne nodded, still bewildered by the morning's events. 7 would be fine. Isaac replaced his hat, tipped it slightly, and made his way to the door. The children watched him go with undisguised fascination. Miss Jameson, young Emma Peterson piped up. Are you really going to marry Mr. Caldwell? Daphne turned to the class, finding 20 pairs of eyes fixed expectantly on her. That remains to be seen. Now back to your reading, all of you. As the children reluctantly returned to their primers, Daphne sank into her chair, her mind whirling. In the span of an hour, she'd been dismissed, proposed to, and temporarily reinstated. What would the evening bring? And more importantly, what would she say to the rancher when he called? The remainder of the school day passed in a blur. Daphne went through the motions of teaching, but her mind continuously circled back to Isaac Caldwell's unexpected proposal. By the time she dismissed the children at 3 o'clock, rumors of the morning's events had spread throughout Aurora. As she walked the short distance to her small rented house on Maple Street, she endured curious stares and hushed whispers. Mrs. Larson, the baker's wife, actually crossed the street to intercept her. Miss Jameson, is it true? Has Mr. Caldwell offered for you? Daphne forced a polite smile. Good afternoon, Mrs. Larson. I'm afraid I can't discuss personal matters at the moment. The woman's eyes gleamed with undisguised curiosity. Well, you'd be a fool to refuse him, that's all I'll say. Wealthiest bachelor in the territory and not hard on the eyes either. Thank you for your insight, Daphne replied stiffly, continuing toward home. Her small house, really just 3 rooms with a lean-to kitchen, offered little comfort today. Usually, she found solace in its humble confines, the small collection of books she'd brought from Boston, the handmade quilt her mother had stitched before consumption took her 5 years earlier. Today, however, the house felt like a cage, the walls closing in as 7 o'clock approached. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed her face, staring at her reflection in the small mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, evidence of recent sleepless nights spent worrying about the rumors circulating through town. Her chestnut hair was coming loose from its practical bun, tendrils framing a face that looked younger than her 25 years. "What are you doing, Daphne?" she whispered to her reflection. "Considering marriage to a man you barely know. And yet, what choice did she have?" Teaching was her calling, her passion, and in a frontier town like Aurora, positions were scarce. If she refused, Isaac and the council dismissed her permanently. Where would she go? Her meager savings wouldn't last long. At precisely 7 o'clock, a knock sounded at her door. Daphne took a deep breath, smoothed her skirts, and went to answer it. Isaac Caldwell stood on her porch, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and vest instead of his usual work clothes. His dark hair was neatly combed, and the scent of soap replaced the usual trail dust. He'd clearly made an effort, and something about that touched her unexpectedly. "Good evening, Miss Jameson," he said, his deep voice carrying a hint of nervousness she hadn't heard before. "May I come in?" Daphne nodded, stepping aside. "Please, Mr. Caldwell." He entered, glancing around her small front room with interest. "This is nice," he said, his eyes lingering on her bookshelf. "You've made it homey." "Thank you." She gestured to one of the 2 chairs by the small table. "Please sit down. Would you like some coffee?" "That would be welcome, thank you." As Daphne busied herself with the coffee pot on the small stove, Isaac studied her books. "Quite a collection you have. Dickens, Austen, Shakespeare. And is that Homer?" She glanced over her shoulder, surprised. "Yes, the Odyssey. Have you read it?" A smile crossed his face. "More than once. My father believed education shouldn't stop at the schoolhouse door. This revelation intrigued her. Most men in Aurora viewed books with suspicion, particularly in a woman's possession. Your father sounds like a wise man. He was. A shadow passed over Isaac's face. He died in '67 after the war, took ill on a cattle drive and never recovered. I'm sorry. She placed a cup of coffee before him. My parents are gone as well. Mother 5 years ago, father just before I came to Aurora. Isaac nodded, understanding in his eyes. It leaves a hole nothing quite fills. They fell into silence as Daphne took the seat across from him. Finally, she gathered her courage. Mr. Caldwell, Isaac, please. Isaac, she amended. I appreciate what you did at the school today, but I cannot possibly accept your proposal. It would be wrong to marry for such pragmatic reasons. He took a sip of coffee, considering her words. May I speak frankly, Daphne? She nodded, bracing herself. I meant what I said this morning. I've admired you since you arrived in Aurora. Your dedication to those children, your quiet strength. I've noticed more than you might think. He set down his cup. I understand your hesitation. Marriage should be based on more than convenience. But I'm not proposing a marriage in name only. Daphne felt heat rise to her cheeks. You're suggesting? I'm suggesting we might suit one another well, given the chance to know each other properly. The circumstances aren't ideal, I grant you, but perhaps they've simply hastened something that might have happened naturally over time. His earnestness was disarming. Daphne found herself studying him more carefully, the intelligence in his blue eyes, the thoughtful set of his mouth, the capable hands wrapped around the coffee cup. You hardly know me, she said quietly. I know you left a comfortable life in Boston to teach children in a frontier town. I know you stay after hours to help struggling students. I know you stood up to Hollister when he wanted to exclude the Mexican children from school. Isaac leaned forward slightly. I've been watching, Daphne, perhaps more than I should have. She blinked, surprised by how much he'd observed. And what of your life? You're something of a mystery in Aurora. Isaac smiled. Not much mystery to tell. I came west after the war, worked as a ranch hand until I saved enough to buy my own place. Started with 50 acres and 30 head of cattle. Now I've got nearly 2,000 acres and 500 head. His expression grew serious. I have a good life, but it's been a solitary one. That's my choice and I've no regrets, but lately I've found myself wanting more. And you think I could provide that more? Daphne asked. I think we might provide it for each other. He hesitated, then reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. I'm not asking for an immediate answer, just time to court you properly, to see if what I believe might be possible between us could grow. Daphne considered his words. There was something appealing about his straightforward approach, his lack of pretense. And practically speaking, being courted by Aurora's most eligible bachelor would certainly silence the gossips and secure her position at the school. Very well, she said finally. I accept your offer of courtship, Mr. Caldwell, Isaac, but I make no promises beyond that. Relief and pleasure warmed his face. That's all I ask for now. He raised his coffee cup in a small toast. To new beginnings. Daphne raised her own cup, a cautious smile forming. To new beginnings. They talked for another hour, moving from polite conversation to more substantive topics. Isaac spoke of his ranch, the challenges of raising cattle in Colorado's sometimes harsh climate. Daphne shared stories of her teaching, her hopes for expanding the school's curriculum. By the time he rose to leave, she found herself genuinely enjoying his company. At the door, Isaac paused. May I call on you again tomorrow evening? Perhaps we could walk to the cafe for dinner. The idea of being seen publicly with Isaac made Daphne hesitate. The town would be abuzz with speculation. Yet wasn't that partly the point? Yes, she agreed. I'd like that. He smiled, settling his hat on his head. Until tomorrow, then. Good night, Daphne. Good night, Isaac. As she closed the door behind him, Daphne leaned against it, her heart beating a little faster than usual. Whatever happened next, her life in Aurora had just taken a decidedly unexpected turn. The next morning, Daphne arrived at the schoolhouse earlier than usual, wanting time to collect her thoughts before the children arrived. To her surprise, a small vase of wildflowers sat on her desk, columbines and Indian paintbrush gathered from the foothills. A small note was propped against the vase, for the woman who brings knowledge and beauty to our town. Ike, the simple gesture touched her more deeply than elaborate bouquets from previous suitors ever had. These were flowers Isaac must have gathered himself, not purchased from a shop. Miss Jameson has a suitor. Emma Peterson's voice sang out as the first students arrived, spotting the flowers immediately. Is it true you're marrying Mr. Caldwell? Asked Thomas Miller, ever direct. Daphne composed herself. Mr. Caldwell has asked to court me properly, which is a different matter entirely. Now, please take your seats. We have mathematics to attend to. Despite her attempt to maintain normalcy, the day was anything but ordinary. Several mothers lingered after dropping off their children, clearly hoping to glean information. Even Mrs. Peterson, who would have replaced her had the dismissal stood, offered warm congratulations. Mr. Caldwell is a fine man, the older woman said, her earlier antagonism apparently forgotten. My Henry says he's the fairest employer in the county. By noon, Daphne had received 3 more visitors, all women from the town's social circle, who had previously regarded her with suspicion. Their sudden interest in her well-being would have been amusing if it weren't so transparent. When the school day finally ended, Daphne found herself both anticipating and dreading her dinner with Isaac. What had seemed reasonable last night now felt like a public declaration she wasn't certain she was ready to make. She changed into her best day dress, a forest green with modest lace trim, and pinned her hair more carefully than usual. As she secured the last hairpin, a knock sounded at her door. Isaac stood on her porch, looking somewhat uncomfortable in what was clearly his Sunday best, a dark suit and polished boots, his usual Stetson replaced by a more formal hat. You look beautiful, he said simply. Daphne felt herself blush. Thank you. You're quite handsome yourself. He offered his arm. Shall we? I've reserved a table at Ford's Cafe. Ford's was Aurora's only proper restaurant, catering to the town's more prosperous citizens and visitors. As they walked the short distance, Daphne was acutely aware of eyes watching from windows and porches. Everyone is staring, she murmured. Isaac's mouth quirked in a half-smile. Let them. You've nothing to be ashamed of. Neither do you, yet you're risking your reputation by associating with the morally suspect schoolteacher. He stopped, turning to face her. Daphne, I don't give a damn what Hollister or anyone else thinks. Those rumors are nothing but spite from small-minded people. His directness was refreshing. Most men would be more concerned with appearances. I'm not most men. The simple statement carried a weight of truth that made her study him more carefully. At the cafe, Mr. Ford himself showed them to a corner table, his usual gruffness softened by deference to Isaac's standing in the community. They ordered steaks, a luxury Daphne rarely afforded herself, and as they waited, Isaac asked about her day. Eventful, she admitted. Your flowers caused quite a stir among the children, he smiled. I hoped you'd like them. They remind me of you thriving in difficult conditions, bringing color to harsh surroundings. You have a poetic streak, Mr. Caldwell. Only recently discovered, he replied, his eyes warm. Tell me about Boston. Do you miss it? Daphne considered the question. I miss certain aspects, the libraries, the concerts, the changing seasons, But Boston after the war was different. My father's shipping business failed, and after he died, there was little to keep me there. And your teaching, was that always your ambition? She nodded. Since I was a girl. My mother taught me to read before I was 5, and I wanted to share that gift with others. When the advertisement for a teacher in Aurora appeared in the Boston Globe, it seemed like providence. Their steaks arrived, accompanied by potatoes and early spring vegetables. As they ate, Isaac spoke about his ranch, the daily routines, his plans for expansion, the hands he employed. Many of my men are veterans, he explained. Good men who needed a fresh start after the war, some Mexican vaqueros, 2 best horsemen I've ever seen. Is that why you supported me when Mayor Hollister wanted to exclude the Mexican children? Daphne asked. Because you employ their fathers. Isaac shook his head. I supported you because you were right. Every child deserves an education, regardless of where their parents were born. As their conversation continued, Daphne found herself increasingly drawn to Isaac's straightforward manner and unexpected depths. He spoke intelligently about books, politics, and the challenges facing the West. By the time they finished their meal, she realized with some surprise that she was genuinely enjoying herself. Walking home in the gathering dusk, their conversation flowed more easily. Isaac told her about his childhood in Missouri, his brief time at university before the war interrupted, his dreams for his ranch. Daphne shared stories of her own upbringing, her love of teaching, her hopes for Aurora's future. At her door, Isaac hesitated. May I call on you again tomorrow? I'd like that, she replied, surprised to find she meant it. Perhaps a ride. I could show you my ranch. The invitation was both exciting and mildly scandalous. An unmarried woman visiting a bachelor's home would certainly set tongues wagging. Yet Daphne found herself nodding. I'll come for you after school ends, he said. We should be back before dark. I'll be ready. He took her hand gently, pressing a brief kiss to her knuckles. Good night, Daphne. Good night, Isaac. As she closed the door behind her, Daphne leaned against it, her hand still tingling from his touch. This courtship was moving swiftly, yet it didn't feel rushed or forced. There was an ease between them that she hadn't expected, a compatibility that made her wonder if perhaps Isaac had been right. Maybe circumstances had simply accelerated something that might have happened naturally over time. The next day dragged interminably. Daphne found herself watching the clock, anticipation building as 3 o'clock approached. When she finally dismissed the children, she hurried home to change into her riding habit, a practical navy blue skirt and jacket she'd rarely had occasion to wear in Aurora. Isaac arrived promptly on horseback, leading a gentle-looking bay mare. This is Maple, he said as he helped her mount. She's steady and sure-footed, perfect for a ride into the foothills. The Caldwell Ranch lay 3 miles outside of town, nestled against the first rise of foothills that eventually became the Rockies. As they rode side by side, Isaac pointed out landmarks, naming creeks and ridges with the ease of a man who knew the land intimately. There, he said finally, as they crested a small rise. Caldwell Ranch. Below them stretched a verdant valley, bisected by a clear creek. A large ranch house of hewn logs stood at its center, surrounded by outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where cattle grazed. Smoke rose from the chimney, and men moved about their tasks with purpose. It's beautiful, Daphne said honestly. You've built something remarkable here. Pride was evident in Isaac's voice. Taken 8 years, but it's finally becoming what I envisioned. Come, I'll show you around. They rode down into the valley, where ranch hands tipped their hats respectfully as Isaac introduced Daphne. The foreman, an older man named Jenkins, couldn't hide his surprise at seeing a woman at his boss's side. Miss Jameson is the school teacher in town, Isaac explained. I'm giving her a tour of the ranch. Pleasure to meet you, madam, Jenkins said, eyeing her curiously. Boss has never brought a lady out here before. Isaac cleared his throat. Jenkins, would you make sure the men know to be on their best behavior? Miss Jameson will be staying for supper. This was news to Daphne, but she didn't contradict him as Jenkins nodded and moved away. Supper? She asked when they were alone. My housekeeper, Mrs. Donovan, would never forgive me if I didn't invite you to eat after such a ride. Unless you'd rather not. The hopeful expression in his eyes made refusal impossible. I'd be delighted. Isaac smiled, visibly relieved. Good. Let me show you the rest of the place before we lose the light. He led her through the barn where prize horses were stabled, past the corrals where young colts frolicked, and finally to the house itself. The ranch house was larger than it had appeared from a distance, 2 stories of solid logs with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides. Inside, it was surprisingly comfortable, furnished with a mixture of frontier practicality and unexpected touches of refinement, a Boston rocker by the fireplace, shelves lined with books, a piano in the corner. Mrs. Donovan insists on civilizing me, Isaac explained, following her gaze to the piano. She was my mother's friend, came west with me after father died, says a proper home needs music. Do you play? Daphne asked. Badly, he admitted with a smile, but I like to hear it. Do you? She nodded. Mother insisted on lessons. I haven't played in some time, though. Perhaps someday you might play for me. The simple statement held a weight of possibility that made Daphne's heart beat faster. Before she could respond, a stout woman with gray, streaked hair bustled into the room. So this is the young lady I've heard so much about, she exclaimed, wiping her hands on her apron. Mr. Caldwell has been singing your praises for months, Miss Jameson. Mrs. Donovan, Isaac said, a touch of warning in his voice. The housekeeper was undeterred. Well, it's true. Miss Jameson said this, and Miss Jameson believes that. I've been telling him to speak up for ages, but he's as stubborn as his father was. Daphne couldn't help smiling at Isaac's obvious embarrassment. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Donovan. Likewise, dear. Now, supper will be ready in half an hour. Mr. Caldwell, why don't you show Miss Jameson the library while I finish up? Isaac led Daphne down a short hallway to a room lined with bookshelves. She gasped softly at the collection, easily hundreds of volumes, more than she'd seen outside of Boston. My father's, Isaac explained, watching her reaction with pleasure. And some I've added over the years. Please feel free to borrow anything that interests you. Daphne ran her fingers along the spines, reading titles in wonder. This is remarkable, Isaac. I had no idea. Few people do. I don't advertise it. Ranchers aren't expected to be readers. Yet you are, he shrugged. I enjoy learning. The war interrupted my formal education, but books have been my university since then. Daphne pulled out a volume of Wordsworth. This was my father's favorite poet. Mine as well, Isaac said, stepping closer. Nature never did betray the heart that loved her. She looked up at him, surprised. You know Wordsworth by heart, some passages. I find his words comforting on long winter nights. The image of Isaac reading poetry by lamplight in this room shifted something in Daphne's perception of him. The rugged rancher contained unexpected depths, layers she was only beginning to discover. Supper was a pleasant affair. Mrs. Donovan had prepared a hearty meal of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh baked bread. The conversation flowed easily, with the housekeeper sharing stories of Isaac's early days in Colorado that made him groan with mock dismay. He rode into a cactus patch his first month here, Mrs. Donovan recalled with glee. Spent the evening with me pulling spines from places I'll not mention in mixed company. "Thank you, Mrs. Donovan," Isaac said dryly. "I'm sure Miss Jameson needed that particular image." Daphne laughed, charmed by their easy relationship. "I promise not to share it with my students, though they'd certainly enjoy it." As the meal concluded, Isaac glanced out the window at the darkening sky. "We should start back soon. I promise to have you home before full dark." The ride back to town was quieter, a comfortable silence between them as twilight deepened around them. The first stars were appearing as they reached Daphne's small house. Isaac helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for coming today," he said softly. "Having you at the ranch, it felt right." Daphne found herself standing closer to him than propriety strictly allowed, yet unwilling to step away. "I enjoyed myself more than I expected to," she admitted. "Your home is lovely and Mrs. Donovan is a treasure. She likes you," Isaac said. "She doesn't like most people." "And what about you, Isaac? Do you like most people?" He smiled, the moonlight catching in his eyes. "No, just a select few." The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities. Finally, Isaac stepped back slightly. "May I see you again tomorrow?" Daphne nodded. "I'd like that." "Good." He hesitated, then leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to her cheek. "Good night, Daphne." "Good night, Isaac." As she watched him ride away, Daphne touched her cheek where his lips had been. This courtship, begun as a practical solution to her problems, was rapidly becoming something far more complicated and far more meaningful than she had anticipated. The next 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Isaac called on Daphne every day, sometimes for dinner at the cafe, other times for walks along the creek that ran through Aurora, once for a picnic on Sunday afternoon after church. The town watched their courtship with avid interest, opinions shifting as it became clear this was no temporary arrangement to save the schoolteacher's position. "Mr. Caldwell seems quite smitten with you, Mrs. Peterson observed after church one Sunday, her tone considerably warmer than it had been before Isaac's intervention. "He's a good man," Daphne replied simply. "Indeed he is," agreed Mrs. Larson, joining the conversation. "And to think, we almost lost our finest teacher to Hollister's foolishness." The children would have been devastated. The irony of these sudden allies wasn't lost on Daphne, but she accepted their support graciously. Mayor Hollister, meanwhile, had retreated from his aggressive stance, offering stiff congratulations on her understanding with Mr. Caldwell, and assuring her that her position at the school was secure. On a warm Friday evening, nearly 3 weeks after his impromptu proposal, Isaac invited Daphne to dinner at his ranch. Mrs. Donovan had prepared a special meal, he explained, and the sunset view from the west porch was particularly beautiful this time of year. "It sounds lovely," Daphne said, "but won't it be quite late returning to town afterward?" Isaac hesitated. "Actually, I've arranged for Mrs. Peterson to accompany us as chaperone. She'll stay in the guest room and you can return to town together in the morning." The arrangement was properly respectful of her reputation, while allowing for a more relaxed evening together, thoughtful in a way that touched Daphne deeply. "Then I accept with pleasure." That evening, Isaac arrived with a small buggy rather than horses, Mrs. Peterson already seated inside. The older woman beamed with self-importance at being included in the outing. "So kind of Mr. Caldwell to invite me," she said as they drove toward the ranch. "My Henry's away in Denver on business, so it's a welcome diversion." At the ranch, Mrs. Donovan had outdone herself. The dining table was set with fine china and crystal that Isaac explained had belonged to his mother. Candles flickered in silver holders, and the meal was the most elaborate Daphne had experienced since leaving Boston. Roast beef, fresh vegetables from the kitchen garden, and a delicate apple tart for dessert. After dinner, Mrs. Peterson declared herself fatigued from the excitement and retired to the guest room, leaving Daphne and Isaac alone under Mrs. Donovan's distant but watchful eye. "Would you care to sit on the porch?" Isaac asked. "The stars should be magnificent tonight." The night was indeed perfect, clear and mild, with a three-quarter moon illuminating the valley. They sat in comfortable rocking chairs, the soft creaking of the wooden slats a gentle counterpoint to the chorus of crickets and frogs from the creek. "It's so peaceful here," Daphne said softly. "In town, there's always some noise, people, wagons, the saloon's piano." Isaac nodded. "That's why I built out here. Needed the space, the quiet." He glanced at her. "Though sometimes it's too quiet." "Is that why you asked me to marry you that day?" The question had been on her mind for weeks. "Because you were lonely," he considered this, rocking slowly. "Partly, perhaps, but mostly because I saw a chance slipping away, a chance for something I'd been too hesitant to pursue." He turned to face her directly. "I've watched you for 2 years, Daphne, admired you from a distance. When Hollister threatened your position, it felt like a sign that I needed to stop watching and start acting. You could have simply spoken up at the council meeting," she pointed out, "defended me without proposing marriage." "I could have," he acknowledged. "But that would have been a temporary solution, and if I'm being honest, I'd been looking for an excuse to approach you properly. And now, after these weeks together—" Daphne's heart beat faster as she asked the question that had been growing in her mind. Isaac reached across the space between their chairs, taking her hand in his. "Now I'm certain I made the right choice that morning. These weeks with you have been the happiest of my life." The simple honesty in his voice moved her deeply. "I've been happy too," she admitted. "Happier than I expected to be." His fingers tightened around hers. "Daphne, I know our arrangement began as something practical, but it's become much more than that for me. I find myself thinking of you constantly, wondering what you're doing, what you're thinking, hoping to make you smile." He paused. "I believe I'm falling in love with you." The confession hung in the air between them, honest and vulnerable. Daphne looked into his eyes, seeing the truth there and recognizing the echo of her own feelings. "Isaac," she said softly, "when you proposed that day in my classroom, I thought you were either mad or desperately noble. I never imagined I might come to care for you this way." Hope brightened his face. "And how is that?" Instead of answering with words, Daphne leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened, his hand moving to cradle her cheek with exquisite gentleness. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac's eyes were wide with wonder. "Does this mean you might consider my proposal more seriously now?" Daphne smiled. "I think it means we should continue our courtship and see where it leads us. I'm not ready to give you an answer tonight, but I'm open to the possibility." He nodded, clearly satisfied with this response. "That's more than enough for now." He kissed her hand, then stood, pulling her gently to her feet. "It's getting late, and Mrs. Peterson will be scandalized if we stay out much longer." As they walked back into the house, hand in hand, Daphne felt a certainty growing within her. What had begun as convenience was blossoming into something real and precious, something worth nurturing, worth protecting. That night, lying in the comfortable guest room bed next to the softly snoring Mrs. Peterson, Daphne allowed herself to imagine a future at the ranch, mornings waking to the view of the valley, evenings in the library with Isaac, perhaps children someday, running through the meadows. The vision was so vivid, so enticing, that it both thrilled and frightened her. To want something so much was to risk devastating loss if it didn't come to pass. Yet as she drifted toward sleep, Daphne found herself embracing that risk, opening her heart to possibilities she hadn't dared consider just weeks before. The following week brought an unexpected visitor to Aurora. James Hollister, the mayor's nephew and a lawyer from Denver. His arrival caused a stir, particularly when it became known he had come specifically to investigate the situation with the schoolteacher. "He's been asking questions all over town," Martha informed Daphne breathlessly after school one day. "About you and Mr. Caldwell, and about what happened in Boston." A chill ran through Daphne. The Boston incident, the real reason she had left her home city, was something she had never fully explained to anyone in Aurora, including Isaac. It wasn't the scandal Mayor Hollister imagined, but it was painful nonetheless. That evening, Isaac found her unusually quiet during their walk by the creek. "What's troubling you?" he asked gently. Daphne hesitated, then decided honesty was essential if what was growing between them had any chance of lasting. "James Hollister is in town, investigating me." Isaac frowned. "The mayor's nephew, why?" "I believe he's trying to find something to discredit me to justify my dismissal regardless of our arrangement." She took a deep breath. "Isaac, there are things about my past in Boston that I haven't told you, not scandalous things but painful ones." He took her hand, leading her to a fallen log where they could sit. "Tell me if you wish to, or don't if you'd rather not. Either way, it won't change how I feel about you." His unwavering support gave her courage. "I was engaged once in Boston. To a man named Richard Blackburn, the son of a business associate of my father's. The engagement was arranged more for financial convenience than affection, but I was willing. My father's business was failing, and the alliance would have saved it." Isaac listened silently, his hand warm around hers. "A week before the wedding, I discovered Richard had been unfaithful with my cousin Emily, who was to be my bridesmaid." Daphne's voice grew quieter. "When I confronted him, he was unapologetic. Said it meant nothing, that men had needs and I should understand that marriage wasn't about love but practicality." "Bastard," Isaac muttered. A sad smile touched Daphne's lips. "I broke the engagement, of course, but in Boston society that created quite the scandal. Richard spread rumors that I had been the faithless one, that I had developed inappropriate feelings for a professor at the ladies' academy where I taught. The rumors were entirely false, but they tainted my reputation and cost me my teaching position. And that's why you came west," she nodded. "After Father died, there was little left for me in Boston. The advertisement for a teacher in Aurora seemed like Providence, a fresh start far from the whispers and judgments." Isaac was quiet for a long moment, processing her story. "And now you fear James Hollister will uncover this history and use it against you. It seems likely. His uncle has never approved of a woman in my position having independence. My unwed status gave him the excuse he needed to act against me." Isaac's jaw tightened. "I'll speak to Hollister." "No," Daphne said quickly. "That would only make matters worse. If we appear defensive, it will seem as though we have something to hide." "We have nothing to hide," Isaac insisted. "Your broken engagement is hardly a scandal, especially given the circumstances. In Boston, perhaps not, but here. A woman with a history teaching impressionable children." She shook her head. "Mayor Hollister would find a way to twist it." Isaac stood abruptly, pacing in front of her. "This is absurd. Your past is your own and you've done nothing wrong. If Hollister or his nephew thinks they can use this against you, they'll have me to contend with." His protective anger warmed her heart even as she worried about its potential consequences. "Isaac, please, let me handle this in my own way. I've faced worse and survived." He stopped pacing, kneeling before her. "Daphne, listen to me. You don't have to face this alone anymore. Whatever happens, we'll face it together." The conviction in his voice, the certainty in his eyes moved her deeply. Impulsively, she leaned forward, cupping his face in her hands. "I think I'm falling in love with you, Isaac Caldwell." His expression softened, a smile breaking through his concern. "Well, that's convenient," he murmured, "since I'm already hopelessly in love with you." Their kiss was different this time, deeper, more certain, a promise exchanged without words. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said softly. "Not because of Hollister or the school or what anyone might say. Marry me because I love you and I think you might love me too." The question hung between them, freighted with possibility. Daphne closed her eyes, searching her heart for the answer. What had begun as convenience had transformed into something genuine and precious. Did she love Isaac enough to build a life with him? Could she trust this happiness after the betrayal she'd experienced before? Looking into his eyes, she found her answer. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you, Isaac." Joy illuminated his face as he pulled her into another kiss, lifting her off the log and spinning her in a circle that made her laugh in delight. "When?" he asked, setting her back on her feet but keeping his arms around her waist. "Tomorrow. Next week." Daphne laughed again. "Perhaps we should take a little more time for planning. But soon, I think. Before the school term ends in June." "June," he agreed, kissing her again. "A month from now. Just enough time to make arrangements, not so long that I'll go mad with waiting." As they walked back toward town, hand in hand, Daphne felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever James Hollister might uncover, whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with Isaac at her side. The confrontation with James Hollister came sooner than expected. The very next morning, as Daphne was preparing the classroom for the day, the lawyer appeared in the doorway, his expression coolly professional. "Miss Jameson," he said, removing his hat. "Might I have a word?" Daphne straightened, setting down the chalk. "The children will be arriving shortly, Mr. Hollister. Perhaps after school would be more appropriate. This won't take long." He stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I've been conducting some inquiries about your background in Boston. So I've heard." Daphne kept her voice calm, though her heart raced. "May I ask why the town council feels such investigation is necessary?" James Hollister smiled thinly. "My uncle believes that those entrusted with the education of children should be of unimpeachable character. Your history raises questions about your suitability." "My history?" Daphne raised an eyebrow. "Please be specific. Your broken engagement to Richard Blackburn, the circumstances surrounding your departure from the Winthrop Academy for Young Ladies." He withdrew a notebook from his pocket. "According to my sources, your dismissal came after accusations of improper behavior with a male colleague." Daphne's hands clenched at her sides. "Your sources are mistaken, Mr. Hollister. I was not dismissed. I resigned after false rumors were spread by the man whose proposal I had rejected after discovering his infidelity." A convenient explanation. His tone made it clear he didn't believe her. Regardless, the pattern of behavior suggests a certain moral flexibility that the council finds concerning in a teacher. Before Daphne could respond, the door opened behind Hollister. Isaac stood in the doorway, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. "Mr. Hollister," he said coldly, "I wasn't aware you had business with my fiancée." James turned, surprise briefly crossing his features before he composed himself. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm conducting official business on behalf of the town council." "Is that so?" Isaac stepped into the room, moving to stand beside Daphne. "Because it sounds to me like you're harassing Miss Jameson based on unfounded gossip." The lawyer's mouth tightened. "This is a matter of public concern, Mr. Caldwell, the moral character of our schoolteacher. is beyond reproach, Isaac interrupted. Anyone who knows Miss Jameson can attest to that, including Reverend Morris, who I believe serves on the town council alongside your uncle. Reverend Morris is not privy to the information I've gathered. Then perhaps he should be. Isaac's voice was dangerously quiet. And perhaps the good Reverend would be interested to know about your uncle's business dealings with the mining company that's trying to buy up land east of town land that includes the school property. James Hollister paled slightly. I don't know what you're implying. I think you do. Isaac took a step forward. Your uncle has been trying to force Miss Jameson out since the mining company expressed interest last fall. This moral crusade is nothing but a smokescreen for a land grab. Daphne glanced at Isaac in surprise. This was the first she'd heard of any mining company interest in the school property. That's absurd, James sputtered, though his confidence was clearly shaken. The council's concerns are legitimate, then present them to the full council, Isaac said firmly. With Miss Jameson present to defend herself, and with all relevant facts disclosed including your uncle's private meetings with mining company representatives. The two men stared at each other, tension crackling between them. Finally, James broke eye contact, replacing his hat. This isn't over, Caldwell, he said stiffly. My uncle won't appreciate your interference, and I don't appreciate his attacking the woman I love for his own financial gain. Isaac's voice was steel. Think carefully about your next move, Hollister. After a moment's hesitation, James turned and left, the schoolhouse door closing firmly behind him. Daphne released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Isaac, how did you know about the mining company? He turned to her, his expression softening. Jenkins mentioned it months ago, said he'd overheard Hollister discussing it in the saloon with some outsiders. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when you told me about James asking questions, it started to make sense. You think the mayor has been trying to remove me to sell the school property? Isaac nodded grimly. The school sits on the best access point to the creek. Mining operations need water. Hollister couldn't sell with a functioning school in place. Too many families would object. But if the school closed because the teacher was dismissed, he could claim the building was no longer needed, Daphne finished, understanding dawning. And the children, where would they go to school? I doubt he's considered that part. Isaac took her hands in his. I'm sorry I arrived unannounced. I had a feeling Hollister's nephew might make his move soon, and I wanted to be here. Gratitude and love welled up in Daphne's heart. I'm glad you came, though I was handling it. A smile touched his lips. I have no doubt of that. You're the strongest person I know, Daphne Jameson. The sound of children's voices outside reminded them of the approaching school day. Isaac squeezed her hands once more before releasing them. I'll speak with Reverend Morris today, make sure he understands what Hollister is really up to. And tonight, if you're willing, I'd like to introduce you to someone who might help us resolve this situation permanently. Who? Judge Carlton from Denver is staying at the hotel, an old friend of my father's. He's here to settle some land disputes, but I think he'd be interested in Hollister's activities as well. Daphne nodded. Tonight, then. Isaac's eyes softened as he looked at her. One more thing before I go. He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a small velvet box. I had planned a more romantic setting, but given this morning's events, I don't want to wait. He opened the box, revealing a delicate gold ring set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. It was my mother's, he said softly. I'd be honored if you'd wear it. Tears pricked at Daphne's eyes as she held out her left hand. It's beautiful, Isaac. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then raised her hand to his lips. Not nearly as beautiful as you. The simple gesture, the weight of the ring on her finger, filled Daphne with a certainty that transcended the morning's troubles. Whatever Hollister might attempt, she and Isaac would face it together and they would prevail. Judge Carlton proved to be a formidable ally. After dinner at the hotel that evening, Isaac and Daphne explained the situation while the distinguished jurist listened attentively, his shrewd eyes missing nothing. "Fascinating," he said when they had finished. "Mayor Hollister has overstepped his authority quite significantly. The school property is held in trust for the community, not owned by the town council. They have no legal right to sell it without a public vote. Hollister knows most folks in Aurora value the school," Isaac explained. "That's why he's trying to discredit Miss Jameson, first create a situation where the school closes, then argue the property should be repurposed." The judge nodded thoughtfully. "A clever scheme if dishonest." He turned to Daphne. "And these allegations about your past, Miss Jameson? I must ask, as they seem central to Hollister's strategy." Daphne explained the circumstances of her broken engagement and departure from Boston, speaking candidly about Richard's betrayal and subsequent rumors. Judge Carlton listened without judgment, occasionally making notes in a small book. "A regrettable situation," he said when she had finished, "but hardly grounds for dismissal from your position here, especially given your exemplary record over the past 2 years. He closed his notebook decisively. "I believe I can help resolve this matter. As circuit judge, I have authority to review town council decisions if they appear to violate territorial law. The targeting of a teacher based on unfounded personal allegations, particularly when financial motives may be involved, certainly warrants investigation." Relief washed over Daphne. "What would such an investigation entail, Your Honor?" "A formal hearing, most likely. I'll notify Mayor Hollister tomorrow that his council's actions regarding your employment are under review." The judge smiled slightly. "I suspect that once he realizes his schemes are exposed, he'll withdraw his objections rather than face public scrutiny and potential charges of corruption." Judge Carlton's prediction proved accurate. The following afternoon, a visibly shaken Mayor Hollister appeared at the schoolhouse after classes had ended, accompanied by a stern-faced Judge Carlton. "Miss Jameson," the mayor said stiffly, "it seems there has been a misunderstanding regarding your position at the school. The council has reconsidered its earlier decision and wishes to offer you a permanent contract, effective immediately." Daphne glanced at Judge Carlton, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "I see," she said coolly. "And the concerns about my personal history that your nephew was investigating." Hollister's face reddened. "A regrettable overreach. The council acknowledges that your professional conduct has been exemplary and your personal affairs are your own business. And the school property?" Isaac asked from where he stood near the window, having arrived moments before the mayor. "Will remain dedicated to educational purposes," Judge Carlton interjected firmly. "The mayor has provided written assurance to that effect." Hollister nodded, clearly uncomfortable. "Indeed, the mining company has been informed that the property is not available at any price." "In that case," Daphne said, allowing a small smile, "I would be pleased to accept the permanent position, with one condition." The mayor frowned. "Condition? That the school term be extended through the summer for those children who wish to attend. Many of our students fall behind during the long break, particularly those who must work during harvest." Hollister began to object, but Judge Carlton cleared his throat meaningfully. "A reasonable request, Hollister, given the circumstances. The town can certainly afford a modest stipend for Miss Jameson's summer teaching." With obvious reluctance, the mayor agreed, and after a few more minutes of discussion regarding the details, he departed, shoulders slumped in defeat. Judge Carlton lingered, his expression softening into a genuine smile. "Congratulations, Miss Jameson. You've won a significant victory today." He glanced at Isaac. "Both of you have." After the judge had gone, Isaac pulled Daphne into his arms, kissing her soundly. "You were magnificent," he said against her lips. "Demanding summer sessions as your condition. Hollister looked like he'd swallowed a lemon." Daphne laughed, relaxing into his embrace. "I've wanted to propose summer learning for months. This seemed like the perfect opportunity to secure it." Isaac's expression grew serious as he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Are you truly happy about staying on as teacher? Even after we're married, of course," she said, surprised by the question. "Teaching is my calling, Isaac. It's part of who I am." "That's what I hoped you'd say." He kissed her forehead gently. "I want you to have everything that makes you happy, Daphne. The school, our home, our life together, all of it." The simplicity of his love, its generous breadth, humbled her. "I love you, Isaac Caldwell, and I love you, almost Mrs. Caldwell." His smile was tender as he traced the line of her jaw with his fingertips. June can't come soon enough. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a whirlwind of preparations. News of Mayor Hollister's defeat spread quickly through Aurora, transforming Daphne from a figure of controversy to one of admiration. Mothers who had once eyed her with suspicion now sought her advice on their children's education, while the town's merchants offered their finest goods for her trousseau at reduced prices. Mrs. Donovan took charge of preparing the ranch house, directing the hands in fresh painting and repairs with military precision. A new wing was added to the house, a private suite for the soon-to-be-married couple, complete with a small sitting room where Daphne could grade papers and prepare lessons. "A woman needs her own space," Mrs. Donovan declared firmly when Isaac questioned the necessity of the addition, "especially a woman of learning like Miss Jameson." To Daphne's surprise and delight, Isaac insisted on moving his mother's piano to the new sitting room. "For your music," he explained. "And perhaps someday, for our children to learn." The mention of children so casually included in his vision of their future brought a warm flush to Daphne's cheeks and a flutter to her heart. The idea of a family with Isaac, of children running through the meadows of the ranch and sitting at desks in her classroom, was becoming increasingly tangible and precious. On the first Saturday in June, Aurora's small church was filled beyond capacity. Students and their families, ranch hands and townspeople, even Judge Carlton, who had delayed his circuit to officiate, all gathered to witness the union of the schoolteacher and the rancher. Daphne wore a gown of ivory silk that Mrs. Peterson and several other town women had helped create, with lace at the collar and cuffs that Mrs. Donovan had contributed from her own wedding dress decades earlier. As she walked down the aisle on Reverend Morris's arm, standing in for her father, her eyes found Isaac waiting at the altar, his expression of wonder and love bringing tears to her eyes. "Dearly beloved," Judge Carlton began, his voice carrying clearly through the packed church, "we are gathered here today to witness the union of two remarkable individuals who have demonstrated to all of us the power of courage, integrity, and love." The ceremony was simple yet profound, the traditional vows spoken with genuine conviction. When Isaac slipped the gold band onto her finger to join her mother's engagement ring, his hands were steady, but his voice trembled slightly with emotion. "With this ring I thee wed," he said, his eyes never leaving hers. "And with all that I am, I pledge myself to you." When Judge Carlton pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared was both tender and full of promise, a commitment not just to each other, but to the life they would build together, a life that bridged their separate worlds into something stronger and more beautiful than either had imagined possible. The celebration afterward at the ranch lasted well into the evening. Tables were set up in the meadow near the house, laden with food prepared by the women of Aurora. Music from fiddles and guitars filled the air as couples danced on a wooden platform built specially for the occasion. As twilight deepened into night, lanterns were lit around the perimeter, casting a golden glow over the festivities. Daphne found herself momentarily alone, watching Isaac across the dancing area as he chatted with Jenkins and some of the other hands. "Mrs. Caldwell," came a small voice beside her. She turned to find young Emma Peterson, one of her students, holding out a small package wrapped in brown paper and string. "I made this for you." Daphne smiled, crouching down to the child's level. "Thank you, Emma. Shall I open it now?" The girl nodded eagerly, and Daphne carefully unwrapped the gift to reveal a small wooden frame containing a child's drawing a schoolhouse with a woman in a blue dress standing beside it, and nearby, a man on horseback. "It's you and Mr. Caldwell," Emma explained proudly. "See, you're at the school and he's come to visit you." Tears pricked at Daphne's eyes as she traced the simple, heartfelt image with her fingertip. "It's beautiful, Emma. I'll treasure it always. Are you still going to be our teacher, now that you're married?" The concern in the child's voice was evident. "Of course I am," Daphne assured her. "Being Mrs. Caldwell doesn't change my being your teacher. In fact, I'll be starting summer sessions next week for anyone who wants to attend." Emma beamed. "I'll be there. Pa says learning is important, even in summer." As the girl scampered off to rejoin her friends, Isaac appeared at Daphne's side, slipping an arm around her waist. "What's this?" he asked, noticing the drawing. Daphne showed him, explaining Emma's concern about losing her teacher. I assured her I have no intention of abandoning my post. Isaac's expression softened as he studied the child's artwork. "It's us, just as we should be. You with your school, me with my ranch together, but not diminished." He kissed her temple gently. "I'm the luckiest man in Colorado, Daphne Caldwell." The sound of her new name on his lips sent a thrill through her. "And I'm the luckiest teacher," she replied, turning in his arms to face him fully. "To have found a man who values my calling as much as his own." As the music shifted to a slower tune, Isaac led her onto the dance floor for one last dance before they would bid their guests good night. Under the stars and lantern light, surrounded by the community that had become her home, Daphne rested her head on her husband's shoulder, overwhelmed with gratitude for the unexpected journey that had brought her to this moment. "What are you thinking?" Isaac murmured against her hair as they swayed to the music. "That sometimes life's greatest blessings arrive in the most unexpected packages," she replied softly. 3 weeks ago, I thought I was losing everything. Instead, I found everything I never knew I wanted." His arms tightened around her. "I felt the same that morning I proposed in your classroom, terrified you'd think me mad, yet certain it was the right path forward. For a man who claims not to be poetic, you have your moments, Isaac Caldwell." His low chuckle vibrated against her cheek. "Only with you, my love. Only with you." As the music ended, they stood for a moment in the center of the dance floor, foreheads touching, hands entwined, two souls who had found in each other not just love, but a profound understanding and respect that promised to deepen with each passing year. The guests began to depart, offering final congratulations and well wishes. Mrs. Donovan, wiping tears from her eyes, embraced Daphne warmly before shooing the last lingering visitors toward their wagons. "Time for you young people to have some peace," she declared, her usual briskness softened by emotion. "I'll see to the cleanup in the morning." As the last wagon disappeared down the lane, Isaac took Daphne's hand, leading her toward the house that was now their shared home. The lanterns in their new suite had been lit, casting a warm glow through the windows. "Welcome home," Mrs. Caldwell," he said softly, lifting her into his arms to carry her over the threshold. Daphne wrapped her arms around his neck, her heart full of love and anticipation for the life they would build together, a life that had begun with an impulsive proposal at a schoolteacher's desk, and would continue as a true partnership of equals, bound not by convention or necessity, but by a love as vast and promising as the Colorado sky above them. 2 years later, Daphne stood on the porch of the ranch house, watching as Isaac rode in from the south pasture. Their 10-month-old son Daniel balanced carefully before him on the saddle. The boy's delighted giggles carried across the yard as Isaac urged the horse into a gentle trot for the final approach. "There's my boys," Daphne called, descending the steps to meet them. Her hand rested briefly on her abdomen, where a second child had just begun to make its presence known, a secret she planned to share with Isaac that evening. "And there's our beautiful wife and mama," Isaac replied, dismounting smoothly while keeping a secure arm around their son. Daniel reached eagerly for Daphne, his dark hair so like his father's tousled by the wind, his eyes her green ones bright with excitement. "We saw the new calves," the boy announced as she took him into her arms. "They're small, are they now?" Daphne pressed a kiss to his chubby cheek. "And did you help your pa count them?" Daniel nodded solemnly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The numbers came out slightly jumbled, but the pride in his voice was unmistakable. Isaac's eyes met Daphne's over their son's head, sharing a moment of quiet joy in their child's accomplishment. "He's got his mother's brains, that's certain," he said, leaning in to kiss her softly. "How was school today?" "Wonderful." Daphne smiled, shifting Daniel to her hip. "Martha's decided to take the teacher's examination in Denver this fall. If she passes, she'll be qualified to teach alongside me next year." "She will pass," Isaac said confidently. "She's had the best teacher in Colorado preparing her." The expansion of Aurora's school had been one of Daphne's proudest achievements over the past 2 years. With Isaac's support and Judge Carlton's influence, the town council had approved funding for a second classroom and teacher, allowing Daphne to focus on the older students while training Martha to take on the younger grades. The summer sessions had proven so successful that they were now a permanent fixture, with both farm children and town children attending according to schedules that accommodated their families' needs. Mayor Hollister, thoroughly discredited after the mining company scandal, had lost the next election to Henry Peterson, who proved a staunch ally in educational matters. The new 2-room schoolhouse stood as a testament to Aurora's commitment to its children's future, and to the power of one determined teacher who had refused to be dismissed. As they walked toward the house together, Daniel chattering about the day's adventures, Daphne felt a contentment so complete it nearly overwhelmed her. From the darkest moment of her professional life had come her greatest happiness, a loving husband who supported her vocation as fervently as she supported his, a son who embodied the best of them both, a community that valued her contributions, and a future bright with promise. That evening, after Daniel had been tucked into bed with a story and a song, Daphne and Isaac sat together on the west porch, watching the sunset paint the valley in shades of gold and crimson. His arm around her shoulders, her head resting against him, they shared the comfortable silence of two people entirely at ease in each other's presence. "I have news," Daphne said finally, taking his hand and placing it over her still flat stomach. "We'll be welcoming another Caldwell in about 7 months. Joy transformed Isaac's face as her meaning registered. "Truly," he whispered, his hand spreading protectively over the place where their second child grew. "Oh, Daphne." "I'm thinking February according to my calculations," she said, smiling at his wonder. "Daniel will be nearly 18 months by then, old enough to understand he's a big brother, I hope." Isaac gathered her close, his kiss expressing all the emotion words couldn't contain. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, a position that had become their own private gesture of connection. "When I proposed to you that day," he said softly, "I never imagined how completely you would transform my life. Every day with you is a gift, Daphne Caldwell." She smiled, touching his cheek with gentle fingers. "And to think it all began with a dismissal notice and a desperate proposal." "Not desperate," he corrected, kissing her palm. "Inspired, the best decision I ever made." As darkness fell around them, they remained on the porch, talking quietly about their hopes for their growing family, their plans for the ranch and the school. The future they continued to build together, a future founded on that unexpected moment when a schoolteacher was dismissed for being unwed, and a cowboy proposed at her desk the same hour, changing both their lives forever.